Hello, welcome to Startup C. And today I have the pleasure of asking Tareef Jafferi, founder and CEO of Happily.ai, some questions. And I see that there are a couple of you guys here. I just want to give Tareef, I just want to give a quick shout out to the people who actually came. Uh, Dov. Okay, if I say that right. Okay. Dov, me, and you. Okay. All right. This will be uploaded to YouTube afterwards. But Tareef, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, David. Thanks so much for having me. Myself, I'm just a guy who likes to build products and finding excuses to build things that I really find useful, that I really believe in, right? And I've been doing that for a while. On this entrepreneurship path for I think what is it, 17 years now. Met my fair share of disappointments and failures, of course, trying to learn as best as I can from them.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I'm just on this path. I don't know how else to define myself, but I work at Happily, and I just wake up every day trying to make it better.
That's an awesome answer. I'm going to get into some of these questions, we spoke briefly, so some of these questions were obviously I've crafted based on our previous conversation, but I wanted the audience to kind of figure out who you are first before we get into like what you believe in and what you espouse. Where did you grow? Where did you grow up, and how did that impact your future career decisions?
I was born in Thailand, grew up in Kuwait, uh, pretty much the entire time, 17 years before going to undergrad in the US. The only times that was interrupted was during the Iraq War and the Gulf War and the Iraq invasion. That's when we had to evacuate. I was very little then, so I would say that that was a struggle of any sorts.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, after growing up in the Middle East and visiting Thailand every summer because my broader family is here, I guess
Hmm.
I always viewed Thailand as the apex of civilization just because when you compare it to Kuwait, which was, just it's desert and
Hmm.
at most like one-story buildings. So I guess I was very enamored with Thailand, this part of the world, my family being
Hmm.
here too. So it was always plugged into my head that this is kind of where I would want to set my roots eventually. And I think my
Wow.
career decisions and everything kind of led me back home here, which is where you find me today.
Hey, can I ask you a follow up? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
How did your so you were born in Thailand. Was your family there because of work or because of a career or your mom or dad or
Yeah, so my both sides of my family have been in Thailand for like I'm a fifth generation Thai, so immigrated here in the late 1800s. So we consider ourselves more Thai than well, like ancestrally from India, but that I
Oh.
immigrated to Thailand a while ago. My father found work as an architect in Kuwait, so a bit random, but that's why he was there. And so yeah, that's it's a bit random about why, but Thailand I still consider it home.
Okay, cool. I know that you went to I know you went to some prestigious schools. You graduated and you decided to be an entrepreneur of all things in life.
Of all things.
You could have taken the easy route. Why did you do that? And number 2, as a follow-up to that is I watched this NBA podcast where these former NBA players kind of ask NBA players to come on the show, and they say, "Hey, what was your first welcome to the NBA moment? Like
Mm,
when you knew you were in the NBA, when pretty much you got your teeth kicked in, or something to that effect."
yeah.
Uh, that would be my second one. What was your welcome to entrepreneurship moment? But the first one is, why did you even decide to become an entrepreneur?
Oh yeah. I mean, I it's such a it's a good question because I think about it a lot. I still don't have a really good answer for that, other than just I guess role models when you grow up, the people around you, and you see, my grandfather built a business by himself, my dad as well. So you kind of aspire to be these people, and you see that they do it, and how much conviction and passion they have, and that's what really pulls you in. I think that
Mm,
especially when you're a kid, you don't really see all the hardship. They don't let you see how difficult it is. So you only see the good stuff. And so you get sucked into the good stuff. And then yes, you get your teeth kicked in. And I think that's what my introduction to entrepreneurship was okay, I think I could do this. I think, I studied material science and engineering. So
mhm,
from a science and engineering background, building products was seemed to be a very technical endeavor. I'm like, I could figure this out. I
mhm,
I learned how to code, I learned how to design, and I built the first product, but then realized that that's the easy part. The hard part is turning this into an actual business, and that's entrepreneurship, right? It's not
mm,
just the invention, it's the commercialization of the invention. I think that's when I really got my teeth kicked in. Being in Thailand at that time, during the global recession, trying to do something new and saying, okay, I built this, now I have to go sell it. I hate selling, but okay, what does this look like? And then going out and doing it in a second language. So, Thai is not my first language. So all these different pieces, like if there's no support, you're by yourself and you're doing something that you have no idea what you're doing. And then I think it's expected that you're going to hit failure or it's not going to work the first time around. But when it doesn't work
mhm.
the 50th time around, you start losing a lot of faith in yourself and also in the
Yes.
world and the universe as a whole. So I think these are the things that you kind of, I guess it's a character building exercise, but you only see it like that from, being miles away from it now. But I think in the
Mm,
moment, it was very painful.
absolutely. I can for a product you described yourself as a product person, and I do believe that you are. So when you talk about the commercialization or the productization of your service or platform, I'm sure that you faced a lot of challenges. Actually, I wasn't going to ask this question, but since you brought that up, I saw in another interview that you are an introvert. I
Yeah.
believe it was from Roshan's past interview with Tech Talk Friday. I was just lay it out there. How can introverts lead a startup effectively, knowing that you have to be the front person as the founder, the CEO? What are some things that you do to kind of you know lead your company as an introvert? Which I don't think a lot of people discuss, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, in any test that I take, whether it's the Big Five, the MBTI, whatever, I score like a
Mhm.
99% introvert score. Like I'm not even slightly. I'm like as extreme as you can get. Um,
Wow.
which means that you end up having to figure out how you're going to deal with that, right? Whether it's going into work and dealing with and facing people, interacting with people all the time. It's that part's not too bad because with introverts,
Mhm.
at least for me, interacting with my close network is fine. It's going
Mhm.
into like going to network, going to events, going
Yeah.
out to sell, meeting strangers, doing the whole small talk thing. It just that's devastating to my energy levels. And so I realized, and that was really tough. I think a lot of people, if you're really geared towards sales, you're more extroverted,
Mhm.
you get to balance the hardship of being hard to sell something early is hard enough, but you might get the energy fill and the fuel from interacting with people, etc. As an introvert doing that, it's like a double negative. It sucks to be rejected. It also sucks to go out and actually meet people. So I think that was a very big part of like building extreme discipline. Like there's no excuses here. As much as you hate it, you
Mm.
still have to do it. But I think because you develop so much scar tissue there, everything else becomes easy. Everything else is not as painful as that. So I think it just allowed me to do other things that people weren't willing to do because I already, I had to face the worst of the worst in that kind of work stream anyway.
Hey, that's interesting. So after you've done this for a while, do you feel as though maybe your recharging mechanism has it sped up over the years? Because
Mm,
I have very close friends who are introverts. My wife is an introvert, so
okay.
she needs to recharge
Yeah.
alone
Yeah.
so that she's ready to face some of these other things. And number two, does remote work? You've mentioned you mentioned that you're a hybrid kind of situation. Does that help in that regard?
It does help a lot.
Okay.
So I think
Okay.
that was a yeah, that definitely changed things. But I think that the recharge thing is it's a good way of putting it, right? Like it's not about it's where you get your energy from and what
Mm,
depletes you. And I think that over time I'm trying to be more intentional about where I spend my time. Like to stuff 3 client meetings in one day, I know I could do it, but it's gonna debilitate me for the next two. So I have to make a very clear choice. Like, can I afford that? Versus trying to
mm.
be more sensible about how I spend my energies and things like that. So I think when you're this extreme, like as I am, you have to pay attention to that. Whereas I think for other people who might be more ambiverted, maybe they don't have to think too much about
Yeah, they don't.
how to allocate your time and where how you're spending it. So yeah, I just had to be more intentional about that.
Absolutely. I have a quota system in our house that I cannot create. I cannot schedule more than like one party or get
Okay.
together a month.
Okay.
This is this is real.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a question from Ken. I don't know who Ken is, but shout out to Ken. What was your biggest aha moment about workplace culture that changed how you built Happily.ai's product? Wow, that's a good question, Ken.
It's a really good question because I wish I understood culture earlier, right? You read a lot about it. I read a lot about it. I studied people analytics at MIT. So, there's a lot of academic kind of inputs, but it was only when I worked at Google for a bit in time where actually it was a light bulb. Oh, this is what culture is. And a lot of the things they're writing about culture are actually, in fact, wrong. And so it took a real life experience to really understand what it was about. And I think that's
Mm,
also why, even till today, I find it very difficult to talk about culture. Because if you've never experienced great culture before, I don't know how to describe it to you, right? It is magical. It's a feeling that you have when it's like a
mm,
sense of belonging that you have with other people. You realize that it's more about relationships than anything else. It's not about the perks or the ping pong tables or whatever people say, and it's about understanding how do you actually create or form these quality and strong relationships, right, within the environment that you're trying to build this in. So in terms of workplace culture, what does that mean for your people interactions? At
mm,
Google, I had a manager who, for some reason, I had no idea why, he spent 5 minutes with me every day to check in with me, and I never had that
mm,
before in my life. And it was very foreign to me. So I even told him, I pushed back right away. It's like, hey, you're really busy, you definitely don't need to do this, right? Once a week is more than enough. And he's like, nope, we're doing this. And after 2, 3 weeks, I formed a completely new relationship that I've never had with someone before. It wasn't friendship, like I didn't go to his barbecues or anything. But for the first time within a context of work, I had built a trust relationship that I've never had before. That as a person who never went to people for help, I actually
mhm,
look forward to not even asking for help, but just talking and just validating things with this person. And
mm,
after later on, I realized this was helpful for him too, right? So this idea that the culture is a byproduct of the relationships that you build in a very clear direction as well. And that was my aha moment was, okay, actually, this is not very expensive to do. Any workplace, if they're able to form the right relationships, can have great
mm.
culture. But then that was kind of how the inspiration for Happily is like, okay, it's a simple idea, very hard to execute. Can we use data and technology to actually drive this home?
Wow, I think by the way, I never heard that story from any of the research that I did on you.
Okay.
Uh, I think that's the first time I'm hearing it, but it actually makes a lot of sense. I have to ask you a follow up based on your conversations with that manager. What sort of questions did he ask you? Were they work related? Were they personal? I mean, like,
Yeah.
how did this rapport kind of build? What line of questioning did he have, or was it were they even questions?
Yeah, there were questions. It was a lot of validating, which I think when you are managing, and maybe it's not fair for me to say this, but I'd like to consider myself somewhat of a high performer. So you don't really
Hmm.
want to get in the way of people who really love what they're doing, but you're always trying to understand if there is anything in the way that you have to try to get out of the way, right? So I think
Mm,
the line of it was very natural. It wasn't a structured, prepared set of questions that I think a lot of one-on-one meetings kind of end up being, which I don't think that that's how you should do it. But yeah, I think he also had incredibly high EQ to really understand the nuances. If I was not feeling great a certain day, he kind of read that, and I didn't even know how. I didn't need any
mm,
emotional support to get through bad days, but the fact that somebody was there to validate it was actually quite refreshing. And I think
wow.
over time, and this is why I learned about like great people management is if you can support someone before they even ask for it, that's a very powerful thing, right?
Yeah.
If you wait for the
Yeah.
person to ask you for help, you're already a step too late if you really want to have a really strong relationship. And I think we could
Yeah.
relate. Like if you have a really close friend, they know what is going on with you before you even tell them. There's a different version of that that happens within the workplace. And you build
Yeah.
a strong enough relationship, that's what that interaction is like. And it's very powerful.
That's a great answer. I hope that you use that answer going forward because it actually explained Happily.ai's mission.
Cool.
Um, really, kind of is it's salient point.
Yeah.
What key metrics have you found most predictive? Oh, let me bring Ken's other. Ken has some really good questions. I
Yeah.
don't know you, Ken, but I like you. What key metrics have you found most predictive of employee happiness that traditional engagement surveys
Mm.
often miss?
We could have a whole case study on this question, right?
Yeah.
One, annual surveys are terrible.
Yeah.
I did, I a lot of the academic research I did was based on these data sets, and we have to also, before we even use them to interpret and analyze, we have to really understand the validity of the data. Most of it was trash, right? We
Mm,
talked to people who took these surveys and like, yeah, I didn't even read the question, I'm just answering them. Or we get things like the only way management will hear me is if I answer in the most extreme way possible. So you're fighting with completely random kind of results versus results that are skewed, biased to the extreme. And that's the data set that you're using to make really
mhm,
large people investment decisions. So not great, right? So in terms of the metrics, what we found to be much better is longitudinal data. Basically, captured data. It's yes, the way you frame the question is important, and we could talk about the metrics, and I'll share some. But it's more about just capturing it on a more continuous spectrum, not once a
mhm,
year. And happily, we do every day. And so, if you imagine having daily data where you could ask a lot of different types of questions, understand people on a deeper level, but then because it's longitudinal, you can understand deviations from a baseline. And those deviations are more insightful than the absolute responses that you get, right?
mm,
Um, but and in terms of then understanding how to measure culture, there's a few, right? ENPS is a universal metric for employee satisfaction. So that's something that we would ask regularly. We also try to assess well-being. Well-being is a very difficult thing to assess. The World Health
mhm,
Organization has a something called the WHO-5 index that measures well-being. So yeah, we could have a whole conversation about what are really good metrics to measure certain things. But I think
mhm,
the key learning is longitudinal beats standalone data points. And so if you
mm.
can find a way, even just 3 to 5 questions, but ask them more regularly, is a lot more useful than asking 50 questions once a year.
Got it. Great answer. I'm gonna stay on this data kind of topic. Happily.ai's data gives you an edge, and you know what I mean. You have proprietary data set
Yeah.
basically coming in from all of these companies. Uh, Beyond improving your platform, how else do you leverage it for strategic advantage? And number two, yeah, let me just go with that one first. But honestly, to distill this to even more simpler terms, which I need to do sometimes, what are you going to do with the data? How are you going to build a better product with this data? Um,
Yeah.
and how is this going to benefit more companies?
I think that the best answer I could give today is one that I think is very relevant, which is that we're in the age of artificial intelligence, and we all know that data is going to be the difference maker when the models themselves are no longer something that's going to be unique across different companies. The accessibility to AI models is now so much easier. So the our advantage is that we have a very large data set that is much richer than anybody else in the world. We have daily data, longitudinal data across over five, 600 metrics that we've been measuring for 8 years. So
Yeah.
that's the starting point that we have.
Mhm.
And what we're able to do with that is we understand employees at a much deeper level to help them with the personal interventions, coaching, etc. That if we had to start today collecting data from day one, we'll be in a much greater disadvantage. So yeah, I think that in the strength that because of the data that we have, now that AI is entering the world, we are able to leverage it, 10 times more powerfully than I think anybody else can. And so that's something that I'm really interested in exploring and will continue to.
Let me just follow up. There's definitely different verticals, right? So industry specific,
Yeah.
hospitals, schools,
Yeah.
and I work for a school, and I'm very familiar with the education sector.
Cool.
By the way, Ken, you just hopped on. I just answered. Reef just answered a bunch of your questions, so thank you. Uh, thank you for all those questions, Ken.
Thank you.
See, look at this is the only show on Startup C where we shout out the participants like this. Okay, Ken.
Love it.
So keep on coming back to the next one. So, l- uh, I was I was saying like there's different verticals, right?
Yeah.
So in the education sector, a lot. I'm telling you, it's so important to have teachers
Yeah.
in a good working culture because
Yeah.
that permeates through everything.
Yeah.
And the biggest beneficiary are the students, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make teachers happy? How do
Yeah.
you how do you what metrics are we putting in place to make sure that they are in a good, healthy, happy working environment?
Yeah.
Your data, can I just ask, I'm assuming it's mostly like businesses that are maybe consumer facing to, adults and stuff like that, but not really like, let's say, schools. I think you do have one. I saw one testimonial with a consultant for a school in Thailand, right?
Yeah.
Um, how do you So what are you gonna do with the breadth of all of these data sets?
Honestly, it's like this is early days because there's so much we
Yeah.
can do. We entered thinking that this would be for like your stereotypical office worker environment. We learned that
Mhm.
that's completely false. Our best customers are manufacturing companies with factory workers. And like we didn't realize this would be relevant to them, but it's hyper relevant, right?
Wow.
We work with hospitals. We also didn't realize how important this was, that like nurse well-being is at an all-time low. Why is that?
Mm.
For a lot of reasons. So we need to be able to manage that better. Schools, exactly what you said, David. Like I have a 5-year-old, but when he was entering schools, I was speaking to my wife. It's like, okay, we have an opportunity to ask a few questions to the school and the teachers. What is the question that we should be asking them? Maybe occupational hazard, but all I wanted to ask is, are you happy?
Are you happy? I was about to just say that, yeah.
Right? That's all we want to know. But of
Yeah.
course, we don't. Like they could say that they're happy even if they're not. But I think that especially in the education, and I'd love to have another conversation with you about this, but I think the stress levels in that kind of environment is so much more elevated. There's so many more stakeholders that you have to manage today in the education system than compared to 20 years ago. And that directly impacts teachers who are taking care of our kids, right? And what we found in the data that was really interesting, and we only really realized this because COVID hit. And when COVID hit, when companies went to work in the remote mode, we
Yeah.
saw happiness levels go up. So the question we ask every day is, how are you feeling today? And there were more people saying that they were very happy or pretty good than ever before, right? I don't
Wow.
have to commute. We're in Thailand, so commute sucks. Happiness was just going up and up and up and up. But well-being scores went down, down, down. And it was bad to begin with. Well-being measured on the WHO 5 scale, it goes from 0 to 100. The average score pre-COVID was 68 out of 100, which is
Mhm.
okay, not great.
Mhm.
During COVID, that went to 52 out of 100,
Sure.
and it didn't really recover. right? So this idea that our happiness state and our well-being state are two different things. And I think part of human resilience is that we're more attuned to the happiness state than the well-being state. It gets us
Sure.
through the day, it gets us through bad moments, right? It's this idea that the happiness is caused by comfort. So having a Big Mac at midnight on a weekend feels good, even though that's not healthy for us. I think that's what working from home has kind of done to us. It's convenient and comfortable, but it's
Hmm.
unhealthy because the relationships that had been such a big part of us having great well-being are now missing,
Yeah.
and we need to compensate for that. So I think within the workplace too, we are also measuring all-time low levels of well-being. And when a person
Hmm.
has low well-being, it's very hard for them to have a high capacity for empathy and patience and self-awareness, all these things. You can't
Which
ask
teachers
someone.
need.
Exactly, they need that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's very unfair to ask someone who is critically low on well-being to do all these things that require well-being to do. So I really hope that we could do more work to help in that space and other spaces where the stakes are quite high to get this right.
That's very clear. By the way, I was to be to be 100% with you, 100%. Uh, I was a little kind of maybe not super in tune with what you were trying to accomplish because I could see all the words and I could read but um you kind of sharing these certain instances have made it really clear in my mind what you're after. And I think you're after something good.
I hope
So
so.
I'll just go into the next question. I just want to say that. I think you're after something good, something that's actually worthwhile pursuing. How do let me go with Ken's next question. How do cultural differences in Thailand impact how you approach measuring and improving workplace happiness? Ken, another banger. This is such a good question, Ken, because this would be probably different in America, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the differences are, but want to give it a shot, Reef?
Yeah, it plays a huge part, right? Because culture is basically a set of norms and values, and each country will have their norms and values. And these dictate how we behave in different environments. The norm in Thailand, for example, is that when you enter a workplace, you assume psychological safety is low, meaning that you can't really express yourself openly. That's not something that you should be able to do. So if you want to have psychological safety, the leaders in the company have to go out of the way to show that the default is actually a different state, right?
Mm,
Powerful cultures are able to override social norms, and this is really important. When you're in Thailand and you want people to be more open, sharing, be okay to fail, because part of innovating and having new ideas is communicating openly, admitting mistakes, learning from them. But if you are trying to innovate in a culture where the social norms are everything opposite to that, of course you can't innovate. You're iterating wrong most of the time. So you have to build a culture where their norms are different. And this becomes really powerful. And norms are basically just social constructs, right? The idea that if you punch someone on the street, you might get arrested. But if you punch
mhm,
someone in the boxing ring, you get cheered. Why are there
mhm,
two different reactions to the same action? Because the social construct was created that within the ring, it's something that is encouraged. So it's the same thing with our workplaces. As leaders, we are choice architects. We are constructing this ring and we're deciding what behaviors are acceptable and not. And I think
mm,
most workplaces, unfortunately, they don't treat these things this way. So the overriding social norms of the country end up dictating the culture of the workplace a bit too much. So I think that's where the cultural differences play a part, but definitely
mhm.
something that we can override when we're intentional about it.
Roshan mentions the same thing actually. He believes in the interview that I did with him. Roshan, as Ken, if you don't know, is my co-host. Roshan Tehran. He is the main man in Malaysia. The most, not the most interesting man, the most connected man I've ever met. Uh,
Yeah,
so he believes the same thing that you do, but he goes one step further and says that these days that companies a company's culture can supersede the culture of the environment that they're in.
yeah,
Um, as long as it's done right, right? I promised you 30 minutes, but can we go just a few more questions if that's okay? I don't want to. I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to answer as many questions though. So let me get to this one. How did you in some of these? I'll just do rapid fire because I'm really interested in some of these. How did you validate your idea for Happily.ai before launching?
A lot of things. We made the decision to gamify the platform because we wanted to get
Mhm,
daily insights, and we had this hypothesis that if we made it fun and game-like, people would be more interested to use it and use it on a daily basis, which was
mhm.
completely outside the realm of possibility back then. We validated that, oh, this works. Going to the gym every day is easier than going to the gym once a week. Same thing. Make it a habit, people stick to it, and we've gamified it. So that we had to test and experiment to validate these things. For all the other things, basically one of our values at Happily is fearless experimentation, and we take that very seriously. It means that anything that we do, we build it as an experiment. And maybe it's my science background that really believes in this. That when you're trying something new, you have to have a hypothesis. So what's your null hypothesis? What are your control variables? What's your method? And what are you measuring as outcomes? And when we're very disciplined and strict about that, it makes every single thing that we try meaningful, whether the hypothesis gets disproven or not, right? So I think that's just how we've did it. We're just very rigorous. We've iterated over 800 times since our inception. So we're just a
Wow,
byproduct of very disciplined validation process.
that's awesome. I know that you. I know that you did a few startups before, Chatterbox being one of them. But I also noticed here's the interesting thing, Reef. I noticed that your startups lasted a long time, relatively speaking, 3 years plus per startup. That means you probably learned a lot, right? So, how have your previous startups helped you prepare for Happily? Number one. And also, like, this is a question that a lot of people probably are asking themselves in the startup world. How did you know when to wind down your other startups?
Yeah. The I don't know if I have good answers for this, but I'll give you the honest ones. The winding
Yeah.
down happened because my obsession switched. Like the idea that you become obsessed with an idea, there's nothing else you could think about. And when that happens, you kind of realize that that other idea is not something you want to pursue anymore. So that's
Mhm.
kind of what I happened to me. It wasn't like a rational this that rational of a decision. It was more I can't really see myself like thinking that deeply about this topic anymore because this is the other thing I'm obsessed with. So I think those are transitions that happened and how I transitioned from one idea to another. But yeah, I think the
Mhm.
learning curve was just um, being very naive early on about what it takes to build and what a startup really is and what a technology startup is. What are their days to days going to be like? And then I think we talked about this a bit earlier, David. I think for me, it took a lot of startups to realize what's really important to me, right?
Yeah.
Your value system gets tested. You think you value something, and then you do it, and you're like, oh, that's not, I don't value that at all, but this is what I value instead. I think that's what character building is. It's like it's almost as if you're understanding what your weights are, what values do you weigh heavily, and what values you don't weigh at all. But you don't
Mm.
get to do this if you don't test it against real challenge and struggle. So I think after five startups, on the sixth one, I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. I knew what I valued. I knew what was meaningful for me, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's keeps me going today.
That's a good answer. And I bet you we could get into this topic later at a future date of what is meaningful to you
Yeah,
and how did you find, this kind of purpose to what you're doing. Because there's a layer of motivation that people don't understand when you
yeah,
find
yeah.
the true value of what you're doing, right? Uh, I really want to ask you these questions. Did you boot? Because I could not find this answer online. Did you bootstrap, or you told me right before this, but did you bootstrap or raise funding early on? What was your approach to funding, especially in Thailand, where I wouldn't say that I'm not sure if they have the same expectations of like, having a liquidity event later on, things that we, are par for the course over here. What was your approach to funding over there?
My approach to funding was always angel investment, and I was lucky enough to have the associations with the right people who really believed in the idea more than
Hmm.
let's grow this as fast as possible and get the 100x returns. And I guess because I'm more of an artist than I am a business person, the
Mm.
whole VC route was never really something that appealed to me. I never had the ambition to become a unicorn, etc. So for me, that entire route just never seemed very appealing. So I think I've always had the temperament that suited better to being more bootstrap, being resourceful, running a bit lean, right? But and being very intentional with decisions, even if it took longer than maybe my peers to to get a certain number of customers. I never so I was very clear about which path I wanted to go down.
Oh, and you found the right investors who believed in that vision.
Yes.
Uh, do you think that you're at an advantage living in Thailand, having raised money there, and you know, it's a lower cost of living, right? For the most part, we're not talking about HISO,
Yeah.
those kind of areas. And by the way, I learned that on YouTube, HISO, high society. Like, is that an advantage to you? And would your kind of approach to scaling and customer acquisition be different if you were in the States?
I think so. But I don't know if I call it advantage or disadvantage. I would say though
Hmm.
that it's a part of the strategy, and when we chose to do this here, we chose
Hmm.
our competition, we chose our market, we chose a lot of different things just because of that decision. And I think there's pros and cons. I would say that we have little to no competitors in the region. We're doing something pretty unique, but
Hmm.
because of that, we also are in a very new market for these kind of things. And so when
Yeah.
you're doing something this new, you the thing that you need to go after are the early adopters, right? The early adopters are the ones who want to take more risks, want to try something
Hmm.
new, but there are not a lot of early adopters in the business side of things in this part of the world. I think on the business side, especially in Asia, we're more the late majority part, which means that we're
Yeah.
waiting for other people to have done it before we do it. So being a startup, I think especially B2B startup in Thailand has that
Hmm.
disadvantage.
Yeah,
Uh,
I see.
Getting customers early is very difficult. So I think yeah, we've kind of picked our battles, and we're trying to figure out how to overcome the battles that we picked for ourselves.
I have to ask you a follow up because it pertains to your family. But Ken just wrote 100. Ken, why did you say 100? Are you also a startup founder in Southeast Asia? Just write it in the chat. That's Tim's job. Your fraternal twins brother who came back to Thailand. I want to talk about that next time.
Okay.
How it is working with family, um, because we all know like Thailand's a very communal place. Southeast Asia in general, uh, I would say for the most part, it's not as individualistic as it is in certain parts of the world. And so, what does that mean for you to be in a startup with your brother? I think these are questions that I think I would like to ask next time. Next time, so
Sure.
let me just get to the last couple. Actually, I'll just ask you the last question, and no, 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 two more questions. Okay.
Sure.
All right. What? I'm not gonna do the why focus. I want to do this one. Is Happily.ai looking to expand into the US or other global markets? If so, what's the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, we built our platform to be world class. We can access the world stage. We're geographically agnostic, so yes, we can enter any market tomorrow. But yes, the go-to-market strategy is always a hard part. Like,
Yep.
which markets will suit us best, and how do we want to enter these markets? We made a decision, and I think we're still sticking with it because we like it, that when we enter new markets, we want to enter through channel partners. So, we enter through, and that's how I know Roshan, uh, because we went to Malaysia, for example, we don't have the temperament to set up offices all over the world. It's not really something I
Yeah.
want to do, but I want to
Yeah.
work with people who really believe in this, because ultimately, the measure of success is the quality of relationships you have. That's how I measure it. So that's
Mm.
how I scale the quality of my relationships. Through the work that I do, I'm able to meet higher quality people who then I get to work with. And so I'm just trying to use that because I think that's the most meaningful thing I can do, and then use that as I scale to other countries as well.
I'm going to ask one follow up and then the last question. The follow up to that is so, like, I'm in America, right? I'm in California and I'm thinking about this and I'm like, wow, this is really important. what you're doing. And let's say that I were to approach like a school or a hospital here. In many ways, we have to have that hard conversation where I translate for them what a healthy, non-toxic workplace environment will lead to in terms of top line growth or bottom line, you know, profit. How do you answer that question when people ask you that? And is that a priority to kind of get in front of customers, um,
Yeah.
kind of preemptively before, the
Right.
conversation continues?
So this is a interesting area to talk about because very clinically speaking,
Mhm.
the things I learned around entrepreneurship when I was at MIT was, okay, you have to have a quantified value proposition. You have to go and help that your client understand what is the value that you're creating for them. And in a very rational sense, when you create greater culture, a better culture, you're reducing your turnover rates. Cost of turnover is very high. You don't see it hit your balance sheet, but oh man, it costs you a lot of money, and other things
Mm.
as well. There's decrease of, but I don't know, but after all these years, there has been no customer that we've gotten because of this reason. There's no
Wow.
customer who decided to use Happily because of the ROI implication. It's just that they
Wow.
care about people. So, all of this clinical kind of operating business models, it didn't matter as much as actually talking to the people who just cared, and they got it right away. They're like, "Where were you 10
Mm.
years ago? Where were you when I started? This is exactly what I need." And I think that what I find is that it's the business owners that have done this multiple times who realize how important culture is. Your first time, you're kind of trying to hit a different goal. Your second time, you're trying to do something a bit different. But then over time, you realize there's nothing more important than the culture piece, because it's not something that you could fix later on as well. The hardest thing to do is, I think the term is organizational debt. There's technical debt,
Mm.
financial debt. Organizational debt is caused by not caring about your culture early enough. And the only way to solve that problem is very painful. You have to remove
Mm.
and rebuild, which nobody's really willing to do. So I think for us, going into any customer, I don't know if it's as much as having that rational conversation and defining the numbers. It's more that, hey,
Yeah.
you really care about your culture. I see that you care. You've done all these actions. We could help a lot and make it easier for you
Mm.
to scale the things that the good things that are within your organization.
That's awesome. The last question for this session that went overtime. I always ask this question because I think that the next generation can benefit from what this platform espouses, which is to unlock human wisdom, right? You know that we are in this AI driven, AI rich world right now. What advice would you give young students? You mentioned that you have a 5-year old. I'm not talking about 5-year olds. I'm talking about, high school, early college, maybe even junior high. What advice would you give them?
I don't know if it sounds cheesy or not, but like I don't think that intelligence is any gonna be a standout characteristic anymore because intelligence is not scaled. So the thing that will become the most scarce is how human are you, like the humanness behind the person. So I think that's where, and that's what honestly in my day to day, that's what impresses me the most. You ask me the people that I meet, like you and others, the ones that impress me, it's not about their intelligence. Sure, they're really smart people, but I'm now more impressed by the quality of the character of the person. I'm looking for kindness. I'm looking for empathy. I'm looking at
Mm.
how much attention they pay to people rather to their phones, their screens, or to some goal that's not even theirs. So I think for me,
Mm.
it's all about that now. And that's, yeah, I believe that.
I wanna I wanna I wanna double down on that answer.
Yeah.
I feel as though, I've watched a lot of these AMAs just to, kind of prep and stuff. And AI comes up a lot.
Mm.
And I'm not trying to be condescending of other people and what their answers are because that's what they believe, but I think it's different when when it comes from a parent. I do. What you said is probably what I agree with the most that I've heard. And that's because if you ask, you
Yeah.
know, people around me, AI has scaled intelligence. There is no way that you're gonna write a better report. There's no way that that you can organize
Yeah,
something of meeting notes
yeah,
faster than or better than anybody else anymore.
yeah,
It really is gonna come down to the relationships that you build and how rich they are.
yeah,
And if they're not built on empathy, trust, um, and like encouragement,
yeah,
I I, that's a scary world, you know? That's a scary world to kind of not think about that as we go forward. And I would actually tell the students the same thing. So, I want to end it on that note. Reef,
sure, David.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your candor. You know, yeah, Ken, me too, man. Thank you so much for joining us, Ken. I know that we don't have like 50 people, but it's the quality of people that are here.
100%.
And you and Dov are part of this. So thank you so much and hope to see you guys next time. Um, thank you, Reef.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to end the event, but you can stay on. Or maybe.